Hello, my friends. Welcome to Woven English. I am so glad you are here today. Find a comfortable place, take a slow breath, and let this story begin. Imagine a 7-year-old boy lying on the floor of a living room in London. It is a quiet evening. The curtains are drawn and the television is on. And the boy is watching a film. He is not simply watching the way children sometimes watch, with half their attention somewhere else. He is completely still, completely absorbed. His eyes do not move from the screen. He is studying the film the way another child might study a puzzle, trying to understand not just what is happening, but how it is happening. Why certain moments feel frightening and others feel hopeful. Why time seems to move differently inside a story than it does in real life. Why some images stay in your mind for days after the film has ended. That boy will spend the next 50 years asking the same questions, and the answers he finds will fill some of the most extraordinary films the world has ever seen. His name is Christopher Nolan, and this is his story. But first, you must understand something about the films that shaped him. Christopher Nolan grew up in 2 countries. His mother is American. His father is British. And he spent his childhood moving between London and Chicago, between 2 very different cities, 2 very different cultures, and 2 very different ways of seeing the world. This experience of living between places, of never being entirely from one country or the other, gave him a particular kind of vision. He was always slightly outside, looking in, always observing, always asking why things were the way they were, rather than simply accepting them. The films he watched as a child were not simple films. His father introduced him to the great directors of cinema. Stanley Kubrick, who made films that were cold and precise and deeply unsettling. David Lean, who made vast epic stories stretched across continents and decades. And the Bond films, which taught him that spectacle and intelligence did not have to be enemies, that you could make a film that was exciting and beautiful and also about something real. At the age of 7, his father lent him a Super 8 camera. A Super 8 camera is a small film camera designed for home movies. And Christopher Nolan immediately began making films. Not home movies, not recordings of family events, but actual stories, with characters and plots and scenes constructed with intention. He would gather his toys and use them as actors. He would write scripts. He would think carefully about where to place the camera and why. Think about that for a moment. A 7-year-old boy who does not simply want to watch films, but wants to understand how they are built, and then build his own. He studied at Cambridge University in England, where he read English literature, not film. At Cambridge, there was no film school, no formal training in cinema, and in some ways, this was the making of him, because everything he learned about filmmaking, he taught himself by doing, by watching, by reading, and by the discipline of literary study, which trained him to think about structure and meaning, and the relationship between form and content. At Cambridge, he joined the Cambridge Film Society, and it was there that he began making short films with real actors, with real stories. He made a short film called Tarantella, which was selected to be shown on BBC television while he was still a student. It was one of the first signs that what was happening inside this young man was something beyond ordinary enthusiasm. After Cambridge, he moved to London and spent several years working in corporate video, making training films for companies during the day, and saving every penny he could so that, on weekends, he could make his own film. He had an idea for a low-budget psychological thriller. A film about a young writer who follows strangers through the streets of London for material for his writing until the following becomes something dangerous and obsessive. The film was called Following, and it was made over the course of an entire year on weekends with a group of friends who worked for free, with a budget of $6,000, with a camera that Christopher Nolan borrowed and returned every Monday morning. $6,000. Today, Christopher Nolan's films routinely cost $200 million to make. But Following, the film that began everything, was made for $6,000. And it was shot in black and white, and it was shot out of sequence, meaning the scenes were not filmed in the order they appear in the finished film, because filming in sequence was too expensive. They shot whatever they could, on whichever weekend worked for everyone, and then assembled the story in editing. Following was shown at film festivals in 1998. It won awards. It was noticed by people in the film industry, and it led directly to what happened next. In 1999, Christopher Nolan began making his second film. This one had a slightly larger budget, around $9 million. It was called Memento, and it would change everything. Memento is the story of a man named Leonard who has a medical condition that prevents him from forming new memories. Anterogrode, amnesia means the inability to create new memories after a specific moment of injury. So, Leonard can remember everything from his life before the accident that damaged his brain. But every few minutes, he forgets everything that has happened since. He cannot remember the people he met this morning, the conversations he had this afternoon, the decisions he made 10 minutes ago. To navigate the world, Leonard covers his body in tattoos of important information and takes Polaroid photographs of everything with notes written on them. And he carries these photographs everywhere, so that when he forgets, he can look at the photographs and remember what past Leonard has decided is important. It is a remarkable premise. But what makes Memento truly extraordinary is not the premise. It is the structure. Christopher Nolan told the story backwards. The scenes of the film run in reverse chronological order, so the audience experiences the film the way Leonard experiences his life. Confused, uncertain, unable to trust what they think they know, arriving at each new moment without the context of what came before. The audience and the character are lost together. Memento was released in 2000, and it was immediately recognized as something new, something that had not been done quite like this before. It was praised by critics, it won awards, and most importantly, it found an audience. Audiences did not find it too difficult or too confusing. They found it exciting, and they found themselves thinking about it for days after watching it, the way the young Christopher Nolan had thought about films, lying on the floor in London as a child, Hollywood noticed. He was invited to direct a remake of a Norwegian film called Insomnia, a psychological thriller starring Al Pacino and Robin Williams, two of the most famous actors in American cinema. And with Insomnia, he demonstrated something that not everyone had expected. He could work within the studio system. He could manage large budgets and major stars, and still make a film that was personal and precise. Then came the offer that would define his career. Warner Brothers, the studio, asked him to reimagine the Batman franchise. Batman had been one of the most popular film series of the 1990s, but the most recent films had been commercial disappointments, and the character needed to be rebuilt from the beginning. Christopher Nolan said yes, but on his own terms. Batman Begins was released in 2005, and it was like nothing that had come before in superhero cinema. It was serious. It was dark. It was grounded in a kind of reality that made the fantasy feel credible. It asked genuine questions about justice and fear, and what it costs a person to dedicate their life to protecting others. It was not a film about a man in a costume. It was a film about a person trying to find a reason to exist. The Dark Knight came 3 years later, in 2008, and it elevated everything Batman Begins had established. The performance of Heath Ledger as the Joker, a performance of such extraordinary power and strangeness that people struggled to find the right words for it, became one of the most discussed performances in the history of cinema. Heath Ledger died before the film was released, and his Joker became not just a character, but something larger, a reminder of how completely a great actor can disappear into a role. The Dark Knight made over $1 billion at the box office. It won 2 Academy Awards, and it changed permanently what people believed was possible in a superhero film. But between his Batman films, Christopher Nolan was making other things too. The Prestige, in 2006, was a film about 2 rival magicians in Victorian London, obsessed with destroying each other. It was about obsession and sacrifice, and the terrible cost of wanting to be the best in the world at something. And then, in 2010, came Inception. Inception is a film about a man who can enter other people's dreams and steal information from inside their sleeping minds. It is a film set across multiple levels of dreaming a dream within a dream, within a dream, within a dream, and it asks the audience to hold enormous complexity in their minds, to track multiple timelines, multiple spaces, multiple rules about how each level of the dream world works. Studios told Christopher Nolan for years that a film this complex would never find an audience, that people did not want to work this hard, that cinema was entertainment, and entertainment was supposed to be easy. Inception made over $800 million worldwide. It turned out that audiences were not afraid of complexity. They were hungry for it. They wanted to be trusted to think and feel at the same time. And Christopher Nolan was one of the very few directors who believed this deeply enough to bet hundreds of millions of dollars on it. Interstellar, in 2014, was his most ambitious attempt to place the human heart inside the largest possible story. It was about a father who leaves his children to travel through a wormhole in space in search of a new planet for humanity to survive, because Earth is dying. It used actual physics about black holes and time dilation. Time dilation means that time passes at different speeds depending on how strong the gravitational field around you is. So a character who lands on a planet near a black hole experiences time passing very slowly, while back on Earth, years and decades pass for the people they left behind. The scene in Interstellar, where the father returns to his spacecraft after what feels like a few hours on the planet below, and receives video messages from his daughter, who has grown from a young girl into a middle-aged woman in the time he was away, is one of the most emotionally powerful moments in Nolan's cinema, because it uses real science to create a human tragedy that could not happen any other way. Dunkirk, in 2017, was something different entirely. It was a war film about the evacuation of 330,000 British and Allied soldiers from the beaches of France in 1940, surrounded by the German army with almost no means of escape. But Christopher Nolan told the story in 3 simultaneous timelines: one on the beach, covering 1 week, one on a small boat crossing the English Channel, covering 1 day, and one in the air, covering 1 hour. And these 3 timelines, running at different speeds, were woven together so that moments of tension and release arrived from unexpected directions. Tenet, in 2020, explored the concept of entropy, the scientific idea that time moves in one direction and events cannot be reversed, and built an action film around the idea of reversing time, around an organization that could make objects and people move backwards through time, while the world around them moved forwards. And then, in 2023, came Oppenheimer, a film about J. Robert Oppenheimer, the American physicist who led the Manhattan Project, the scientific program that built the first atomic bomb during the Second World War. It was a film about genius and ambition and moral consequence, about a man who understood that what he was building would change the world, and who built it anyway, and who spent the rest of his life living with that choice. Oppenheimer won 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director, Christopher Nolan's first Best Director award after decades of making films that critics and audiences loved, but that the Academy had sometimes overlooked. The film was 3 hours long. It contained no digital effects. The nuclear explosion at its center was achieved practically, using real fire and real chemistry, rather than computer-generated imagery, and it starred Cillian Murphy as Oppenheimer in a performance of extraordinary interior depth. Oppenheimer made almost $1 billion at the worldwide box office for a 3-hour film about a physicist with no action sequences and no superhero and no sequel. What does this tell us? It tells us what Christopher Nolan has always believed and always demonstrated, that audiences are more intelligent, more curious, and more emotionally open than the film industry has traditionally assumed. It tells us that the things that make a film difficult to make, the complexity, the ambition, the refusal to simplify, are also the things that make a film impossible to forget. Christopher Nolan does not use a smartphone. He does not use email. He writes his scripts by hand on paper. His films are shot on film, not digital, because he believes that film captures light differently than a digital sensor, that there is a texture to a filmed image that cannot be replicated. He insists on doing as much as possible practically in the real world rather than in a computer, because he believes the audience can feel the difference between something real and something generated. He is married to Emma Thomas, who has produced every film he has ever made, from Following to Oppenheimer. They have 4 children, and they have built something together that is not just a body of work, but a way of making films, a philosophy, a set of beliefs about what cinema is for, and what it can do. What cinema can do, according to Christopher Nolan, is something no other art form can do quite the same way. It can take an audience of strangers sitting in the dark together and make them feel the same thing at the same moment. It can collapse the distance between people. It can make the impossible feel real and the real feel miraculous. It can hold complexity and emotion together without choosing between them. And it can make a 7-year-old boy lying on a floor in London ask questions that will take him 50 years to answer. And so, my friends, the story of Christopher Nolan rests here for now. Not finished, because he is still working, still asking, still building, still refusing to make things simple when the difficult version is more honest. Now, I want to say something to you. Christopher Nolan made his first real film for $6,000, borrowed a camera every weekend, and returned it every Monday morning, and spent a year making something he believed in before the world. Agreed that he was right. There is something in that for all of us. Whatever you are building, whatever you are learning, whatever you are trying to become, the beginning is usually small and slow and invisible to everyone except you. You are here. You are listening in a language that is not your own, and you are understanding more than you think you are. The distance between where you started and where you are now is real, even when it is hard to see. Leave me a comment and tell me this. Which Christopher Nolan film is your favorite? Or, if you have never seen one, which one do you most want to watch? I would love to know. Come back soon, my friend.